Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Rise of Myth Cthulhu video. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the Sorcerer class. This class is known for delivering curses and trading its own health points for additional damage. If you're expecting a whimsical story of magical hats that tell you which house you're going to go to meet friends, I have to tell you, this ain't no kid's story. With that all said and done, let's jump into the class relic. The Sorcerer class relic is the Swamp Plague. We can see here from the top left that we have 12 hit points and 8 sanity to begin the game with. This is a very healthy hit points number and quite low on sanity, so one of the drawbacks in this game is if you fall below 5 sanity you get an insane debuff. You don't have that problem if you're wounded, but there are some enemies that will do extra nasty things to wounded characters, so that's something to keep in mind. Sanity is a little bit... You need to be a bit more precious about protecting it, especially in this class, but I'll explain that in just a moment. Our effect on our class relic is at the end of your turn, you may inflict one condition that is not in play on one enemy. So that basically means that if we've got an enemy that has no status effects on, we can just chuck whichever one we want out. We can put bleeds, we can put prisons, we can stun enemies. So in multiplayer, that means we can choose who the enemy is going to target, or we can play weaknesses. This is going to reduce the amount of damage coming in, or if we're ending our turn in multiplayer, we can put vulnerabilities down so whoever's still playing their turn can effectively get extra damage through. This is an incredibly good class relic, very versatile, and you'll be able to make a decision every single turn. I like to evaluate cards and abilities based on how much energy value I'm getting for that action, and each of these status effects are effectively +1 damage or -1 damage. So you're getting 1 point of effective stats out of an effect that happens every turn, which is worth about half an energy in my calculations. So half an energy every single turn throughout the entirety of the game, sign me up, that is a ton of value. And you can do really cool stuff like slip prisons onto enemies that then gets around guard, or then deals the last point of damage before they attack you, meaning they die horribly and you stand back cackling. I imagine a sorcerer would cackle, maybe that's a witch, I don't know. But all around, Swamp Plague is a fantastic class relic. The insanity effect, which comes into play if we are at less than 5 sanity, means that we add 1 to the energy costs of the first card with sacrifice that you play during a turn. Now, it's important to note that this does not increase the amount of energy you obtain from it when you discard it, so it just straight up makes all of your sacrifice cards worse. Well, it makes the first one worse in a turn, but this is quite a massive drawback. That's a huge cost to be added, and you'll sort of understand a little bit of that when I go through some of the cards in the main deck, and we're going to be going through the reward cards as well. But long story short, you don't want to be insane. You probably shouldn't be wielding this kind of magic if you're not sound of mind. Just food for thought. So for our base deck, I'm going to go ahead and pull the cards out, and then we'll go through them. There are 7 different cards in the set, and these are duplicated in here. Well, not all of them are duplicated, but we have a bunch. So let's start with our sacrifice card, because then that will help put Drain Life into context. So Blood Cool is a melee attack that costs 0 energy, that deals 2 attack and has sacrifice 1. So when we play this, we reduce our life by 1. That's what sacrifice means. This is extraordinarily strong. Like I said before, I generally am happy to pay half an energy per stat, so for 1 energy I'm looking for attack 2, and I'm getting this for 0. I do get to trade a life for it, but the only disadvantage to that is that this can end up killing you if you are playing it later in the game and you're running a bit low on life. This can also never be discarded for energy because it costs 0. You've got to keep that in mind, and also if you are insane, this is going to be 1 energy for 2 damage and lose a life, which is kind of not where you want to be. But if you are in a sacrifice build, this card is absolutely fantastic. It works with a lot of the other synergies that we have, and is a card I'm more than happy to be playing even in the late stages of the game, especially if I'm in a sacrifice build. Our next card is Drain Life. This is another melee attack. It costs 2 energy, and it also discards for 2 energy. It's attack 2, regain 1 health. This card is... it's a little bit difficult. It's great in the early stages of the game because effectively every time you play a Blood Cool, you can offset it with a Drain Life. The issue is that's not a lot of attack for the energy. This is very, very expensive to play, even if you are regaining the health. Now, a cool thing about this card is that it always discards for 2 energy, so even in the later stages of the game, it can become an emergency heal, or it can just be discarded so you can play your other cards that you're going to be picking up along the way. It's not a bad card, it's just sometimes you can find yourself in situations where this is a little bit difficult to play because you need to be playing cards that do a lot more in the later stages of the game. But early on, this is a fine card to play, and keeping your health pool nice and healthy so that you can keep playing your blood claws is going to let you close out fights very, very quickly. And you can also do things, for example, just putting prisons on enemies, so you're getting the extra point of damage each turn as well, which will allow you to clear up quite a few small things. Next up we have Trail. Trail is a melee attack and defense card, so if there's a card that references attacks or defenses, this will count for both of those. So this is attack 1. If the enemy has any conditions, gain defense 1. So this actually becomes quite good value if you can get a condition down. So you pay 1 energy for 2 points of stats, that's 1 defense and 1 attack 1, which is really, really good as part of that ratio. The challenge is you need to get the status effect down first, which you probably already paid for, and this can be a little bit underwhelming when you have other cards in your deck that you could be playing. And this is going to get outpaced very, very quickly, but in the early stages of the game, in cooperative play, when you've got other classes that may be able to put down status effects before you act, this can be great. It also pairs really, really well with one of our defensive cards that we're going to take a look at in a minute, but this is one of the cards I'm quite happy to remove from my deck whenever I'm using the upgrades from progress points. So as you can see here, that we can remove starter cards from the deck if we spend some of our progress points, and this isn't our first playthrough. We can also remove cards from our deck using the store, or we can use, if we're playing solo, we can also use starting boost, which I'll explain in a little bit. Trail, it will do, it's not fantastic, and discarding for 1 energy is a little bit tricky when, for example, you're holding both of these and then you can only play the Trail and not the Drain Life, because Trail discards for 1 energy, Drain Life costs 2 so you can't play it, but you can discard the Drain Life and play Trail. So all around, it's not great, but it will do in the starting stages. Next up we have Front Charge. Front Charge is 1 energy for attack 1 and defense 1, so that's amazing, we're getting good stats for that. But we lose 1 sanity, and on this class we absolutely do not want to be trading sanity. This is a card that I will almost certainly be the first card I remove from the deck every single game. Early on, you can use that sanity to effectively allow you to advance the fight and also not take a ton of damage. So pretty useful if you're in a sacrifice build, but again, I'm playing this in the sacrifice build where I don't want to be insane, and this is trading sanity, so I'm not a fan of this. This is almost always getting discarded for energy if it's not removed from the deck immediately. In a worst case scenario, you can play it, but I will tell you that point of sanity is probably worth more than a point of health in this class. So do keep that in mind when you are charging in and getting a bit aggressive. Now on to our defensive cards. We have 2 different ones. We have Mother Earth, which is a 2 energy defense card. We have defense 2, draw 1 card. Now, I do want to point out that this -1 blue flame means that if we discard it for energy, it's worth 1 less energy. So effectively, this discards for 1 energy, which makes it more difficult to play cards like Drain Life. This does give you defense 2, draw a card when you play it. Defense 2 for 2 energy is really low. Ideally, I'd be looking for 4 defense for that amount of energy investment. You do get to draw another card, which lets you get through your deck faster and get onto your other rewards. But it's a little bit tricky to play this, especially when it only discards for the 1 energy. It can make it a little bit harder to play some of your other cards, for example, Ivy Skin, which we're going to talk about in a moment. It lets you play Trail, for example, so we're discarding Mother Earth and we can play a Trail, or we can play a Front Charge, which we don't want to play anyway. But so this one's a little bit clunky. I don't like having this in my deck in the late game. I'm usually happy to get rid of this for other defensive options. Yeah, I would do my best to not need to play this each turn. I mean, just play it if you have to, but realistically, this is not a great option for you. On the other hand, Ivy Skin is a reasonably good card, especially in solo play. So this is 2 energy for defense 2, so again, stats not incredible, but we get to inflict bleed 1 on all enemies targeting us. So if we're playing solo and we're fighting against 3 monsters, we just get 3 damage that we get to put on everybody, and it also sets us up for things like Trail, because then the enemy has a condition. So bleed deals its damage after the creature attacks. So do keep in mind that you are going to still have to defend against the damage if you are relying on bleed to kill enemies. But what you can do is put bleed on enemies. You can also put the prison effect on them, or you can put a weakness, which further increases your survivability in the early stages of the game. Ivy Skin always discards for 2 energy, so even in the later stages, it's valuable. This is a really solid defensive card. Lastly, we have a skill card, and I think this is actually probably one of the more ridiculous skills that you could begin the game with. Universal Donor. This is a permanent skill, so after we play this, it just stays in front of us for the rest of the fight, and then it gets shuffled back into the deck. after we conclude the fight, this says your melee attacks with sacrifice inflict bleed 1. Which then basically means that our Blood Cool, which is a melee attack, deals attack 2 and puts bleed on an enemy. So that's effectively free damage. It also means that our Trail then does a lot more. It gives us that proper stat to energy conversion. It also costs 0 energy to play, and if we do end up discarding this for energy, it's worth +1 because of the blue flame. So all around, Universal Downer, very, very strong card. I personally think that the Sorcerer is very, very strong in the early game because of Blood Cool and Ivy Skin. Both of these are really, really great, and Universal Downer helps you stack that damage through. It's just a case of sort of getting used to when you should be playing Drain Life, because you are going to have to discard pretty much a bunch of cards in order to play a Drain Life. If we look through the core deck, we actually only have Ivy Skin and Drain Lives that can pay for Drain Lives, otherwise we've got to discard a Trail and a Mother Earth, or a Front Charge and a Trail in order to play Drain Life. So this is quite energy intensive, which kind of puts the explanation before where this is a little bit difficult to play, comes into it. But all around, you have a very solid deck, so it gives you a good push out in the early stages, and you can aggressively fish for your rewards to figure out what kind of build you want to go into. And again, that's going to be status effect focus or sacrifice focus. You can play quite defensively on the Sorcerer because you have a lot of great defense cards, so you can sort of become the team's tank, because you can use your Swamp Plague to put down stun counters, which then draws the attention over to you. And just, yeah, it's a really good starting kit to be pushing out with, and you should be able to get through quite a bit of the early game without any significant trouble, unless you're just spending way too much of your health to do stuff, which, you know, you can get a little bit trigger happy with your Hemomancy. But yeah, let's move into the class items. Class items. So normally we don't begin the game with a class item unless we spend some progress points for it. So after our first or second playthrough, we'll have enough points so that we can go ahead and start with this. However, if you are playing solo, we get access to this card. So this is a double-sided card, and you can choose which side to begin with at the start of the game, but you can't change it after you've made the decision. So looking at starting boost, we get a random class item, maximum and initial health increased by +2, so that gives us a very healthy pool of 14 to play with. Then we get to replace 2 starter cards by 2 random common cards, so out of this pool. This is really, really good. It lets us, for example, get rid of front charge or trails that we're not planning to use. I really, really like this, especially if you're new to the genre of game. This gives you quite a head start and will let you farm up quite a few progress points. One of the challenges that I have with that is that the Sorcerer uncommon cards are really, really good. And when we want to consider whether or not we play starting boost or the other half, the long path, this one just gives us the class item, but servant level enemies reward an uncommon card instead of a common card. And we start getting the servant level enemies from around encounter 5. So we start getting massive upgrades to our deck very, very quickly. I love the long path if you're playing 2-axe. This is going to be pretty consistent across all the characters, but there's also a very strong argument for starting boost for the Sorcerer, because there are cards that you just are a little bit difficult to play in your starting deck. So now that we have an idea of how we're going to get a class item, let's take a look at them one by one. Our first is the Dreamcatcher. The Dreamcatcher says at the end of your turn you may discard 1 enemy's conditions, so that's all the conditions on that character. Regain 1 health per condition type discarded up to a maximum of 2. So the Dreamcatcher can be healing for you for 2 each turn. I find this a little bit difficult to play because if I've spent energy putting those status effects on a creature, there's a good chance that I need those status effects to go off in order to get the value. But what you can do with this is, for example, remove bleed from an enemy where the damage is not going to matter, and then you can start getting health back, and this will help pay for your sacrifice build. And if we have Universal Donor out and we're playing the sacrifice cards, we can be getting bleeds for free, and then we can remove them with Dreamcatcher to offset our sacrifice costs. This can be pretty useful, especially in team play when other people are potentially putting down status effects, but again, it's not my favorite because if I put down status effects, there is a really good chance that I need that status effect to do what it's there for, in order, more so than I need 1 health. Yeah, it's a good card, but it can be a little bit frustrating at times to play. Next up we have the Voodoo Doll. At the start of your turn, if you are wounded or insane, you may inflict 1 condition on an enemy. This is quite spicy, so you don't want to be insane unless you're playing the status effect build, and then you're not going to be focusing on the sacrifice cards. then the Voodoo Doll's great because it doesn't take very much for us to get insane. So if we want to be an insane sorcerer, we probably want to be playing Voodoo Doll. We can also do it from wounded as well if we are in the sacrifice build. And that just effectively then says at the start of our turn, we can go ahead and put status effects, so we can put vulnerabilities down to get extra damage through. Then at the end of our turn, Swamp Plague can put a different condition, because remember they have to be different. And you can start getting vulnerability prison and getting like 2 damage a turn. So effectively getting a free energy every turn when you have these two working in tandem. It takes a bit of setting up to get this one going, because as you start the game, you're going to be at full health, and it's unlikely that you're going to want to drain yourself down that quickly. But Voodoo Doll, very, very strong, and I'm definitely a fan of this. And it's actually really interesting. In Sacrifice, we're likely to be wounded, and then if we're playing status effects, being insane, not having a big drawback for that is actually quite good, so that means we don't have to draft quite as much sustain for our sanity. Next up, we have the Fear Eater. So this class item, at the start of your turn, if an enemy has more than one condition, deal 1 damage to the enemy or regain 1 sanity at the end of your turn. So that you can arrange the end of turn so that your Swamp Plague goes off and puts the second status effect down if you've already placed something like a bleed, and then you can start regaining sanity, or you can just start dealing extra damage to stuff, which is really, really good. Especially regaining a sanity is pretty helpful if we are in a sacrifice build and we want to stay out of insane. This can just help us keep that topped up. And there's some fights where how well you can sustain your sanity does matter. So this is a really, really strong item. I'm not sure if I like it more than Voodoo Doll. It's a little bit easier to trigger, especially early on. So you start getting the benefits. It's a great one. It's definitely one I'm not unhappy to have. And last but not least, we have the Catalyst. So it's a real shame that we can't have these two in the same deck, but each time you lose sanity, you gain 1 energy. This is interesting. Again, if you're playing the status effect build, this is actually really, really good, because we don't mind being insane if we're just putting down status effects and we're not playing sacrifice. This means that our front charge then suddenly becomes attack 1, defense 1, gain an energy, so it costs 0 energy for attack 1, defense 1. This is good, and there's also a couple of cards that we'll explore in the rewards that allow you to trade sanity, so it basically reduces the cost of those cards, which gives you a lot of value. You do have to build specifically around this class item, whereas something like the Voodoo Doll you can just change the way that you play as opposed to needing to choose specific rewards for it. Same with Dreamcatcher, you can always just use the Swamp Plague to just put a status effect on that you remove to gain a life. So this one's a little bit trickier to use, but I do really like it, especially if you're in status effects. That's a great house to be in. Now that we've taken a look at the core deck, we are going to take a look at the common reward cards. So we're just going to grab 3 because I don't want to spoil the entire thing, and you're going to hear me say that in every single video because I know you guys are absolutely going crazy for when the reveals happen, but let's not spoil everything for you. We're going to take a look at Bloodblade. This is a great reward card. It's 2 energy for a melee attack, attack 4, inflict 1 condition, sacrifice 1. This is premium. It's probably my favorite common sacrifice card. You get the condition, so that can be a prison, so effectively that's 5 damage for 2 energy, and we just trade a life in order to play it. This could be a weakness, so it's attack 4, guard 1, and then you can use your Swamp Plague. You can get 6 damage effectively if you melee attack, put the prison, and then you use Swamp Plague to put a bleed. You can get quite a bit of damage going in a turn, so this is very, very good early and will let you clean up a lot of fights. Really excellent card, and if you're playing sacrifice, this is premium. I would aggressively reroll for this. So in this game, to explain that, when you get your rewards, they will flip up in front of you, and you can trade a sanity or you can trade one of your coins in order to reveal a 4th card. If you get a duplicate, that goes back into the deck, and then you get a new card, so you never have duplicate options up here. If I know I'm playing sacrifice, Bloodblade is one that I will aggressively spend my coins trying to acquire. Do keep in mind that you also use those coins to buy health from the shop, so you might be in a little bit of trouble if you're doing a lot of that. And then if you're playing sacrifice, you probably don't want to be trading sanity for those rerolls. If you're in status effects, by all means you can reroll with the sanity because you don't mind being insane quite as much. But Bloodblade, excellent card. Internalize. This is also an insane card. It costs 1 energy. It's a permanent skill, so that just sits in front of you for the rest of the fight. Your cards with sacrifice gain attack 1 and defense 1. So basically you get extra energy points worth of value out of all of your sacrifice cards. And then we come back to Blood Cool, it becomes a 0 energy, attack 3, defense 1. And then when we have Universal Donor out, it's attack 3, defense 1, bleed 1 for 1 health. Internalize, really, really good. The longer it stays in the fight, the more value you get from it. This is really, really good. It's a little bit annoying when you draw this pretty late in the fight and you've already paid a bunch of health through sacrifice effects, but you're still going to play this. There's no way that you're going to get too upset about that when the amount of value you gain from having this in play is really, really high, especially in a sacrifice build. If we're focusing more on the status effects, this is 2 energy for defense 3, so it's a little bit behind where we want it to be, but we do get to inflict 1 condition, and that can be the weakness condition, which would effectively give us defense 4 for 2 energy. Really good. This could be 2 energy prison, and that's effectively 3 defense, damage 1. We can also put stuns out in multiplayer, which then means we can force the enemy to attack into us, which is great because we've just gained defense 3. This is really, really solid and one that I'm always happy to see, especially in multiplayer, because it gives you a lot of options depending on what type of fight's coming up. I'm a little bit less keen on this in solo. When I play solo, I'm very much a fan of the sacrifice build. I like lots of damage, big numbers go brr. But in multiplayer, playing around the status effects give your team so much setup, especially when some of the other classes want the enemies to have weaknesses on to gain extra damage or bleeds, but you'll learn a little bit about that if you watch our other videos on the class deep dives. But this is a great card in multiplayer and one that I'm quite happy to prioritize. Next, we're going to jump into the good stuff. We're going to take a look at the uncommon reward cards here. These cards are very, very powerful, and I'm always a huge fan of them, and you'll kind of get an idea of why when we go through them. Our first card is Aggravate. This is 2 energy melee attack to inflict 2 conditions and attack 4. Absolutely bonkers. That can be 2 prisons. It doesn't say that you can't duplicate the conditions, so you can just straight up hit something for effective 6 damage for 2 energy on an uncommon card. That is very, very good. It can also be attack 4, defense 2 with the 2 weaknesses. You can basically set up anybody else on your team to do anything that they need to with status effects. This is really, really good. It also goes well with our class item, the Fear Eater, where we can then have the 2 status effects on something to give ourselves back our sanity, or we can use it to deal extra damage. Aggravate is great. I'm quite happy to play this in my sacrifice builds as well because the damage output on this card is just absolutely nuts. Really, really good card. Next up, we have Dry. Dry is a 0 energy defense card that you can discard for 1 energy. That's what the blue flame is there for. Defense 2. Okay, that's great. We're paying 0 energy for 2 defense. But the really cool thing for this is we gain 1 energy for each enemy targeting us. In solo, that's going to be all of them. So we could effectively play this, get defense 2, and then even be gaining 3 energy without having to discard any of our other cards. And that means that we're going to be able to play out a whole bunch of our hand. This is a very, very good card. I'm very happy to draft this any chance that I get for it. I mean, I'm probably not picking Dry over Aggravate, but it kind of depends on where I'm at. In solo, both of these cards are very, very strong. I highly rate both of them. I'm probably always picking Aggravate because I'm generally more aggressive with the way that I play through this game. But Dry is much better for some of the Great Old One fights. It depends on the fight. I don't want to spoil too much, but some of the more minion-focused fights, Dry can be very, very good for you. Lastly, we have Refund. Refund is a 1 energy card that discards for 2 energy, and it's a permanent skill. Each time you lose health by sacrifice, deal 2 damage to 1 enemy. So this isn't even once per turn, so this is absolutely filthy. You can imagine playing Blood Cool, and then playing one of our other sacrifice effects, and then just suddenly getting an extra 4 damage out of that. That seems amazing to me. This is a really, really strong card, and it's one that rewards you if you have been aggressively looking for sacrifice cards, and it's another one that I would potentially be trading my coins for when searching on the rerolls to pick up a refund. This is really, really good, and the earlier you get it in play throughout a fight, you can close fights very, very quickly. You can kill off a lot of the smaller enemies without actually having to focus on them, just because you get through to them based on residual damage coming out of this skill. Really, really excellent card, and can let you pile the damage into Great Old Ones if you want to play really, really aggressive. For those of you that are going to be hunting in Act 2, we're going to take a look at 3 rare cards. So you get one of these after you beat the Great Old One, and these are just 3 that I'm going to show you. They're not the entire pool, but these are ones that let me articulate a little bit about how ridiculous things get. These cards are incredible, and you are going to need them when you fight any of the Act 2 bosses, especially if you start playing in Nightmare mode where you have a whole bunch of other things going on. Let's go one by one. So our first one is... Oh, I should have practiced this before I got on camera. Hematokinesis? There we go, first try. 2 energy, a melee attack, very, very good. Attack 4, that's great, we're getting the ratio. Add 4 attack for each card with sacrifice you've played this turn. 4 attack for each card you've played with sacrifice. Blood Cool costs 0. If you have a hand where you've got like 3 sacrifice cards, all of a sudden you get to play those cards, providing you can get enough energy. Fake cards like Dry will help with that. And then you can just go attack for 12. Oh, it's actually 16 because we played 3 sacrifice cards in this. Attack for 16 on 1 card. Just absolutely ridiculous. There's pretty much most enemies are going to be absolutely obliterated by that. Obviously, you're going to have to focus quite a bit on your sustain for your health to make sure that you can afford this, but even if you just play 1 sacrifice card, you're getting 8 damage for 2 energy, which will be enough to kill most things that aren't elite or higher. This is just absolute gold. I love this card. Next up, another card for the sacrifice build is Reverse Flow. It's 2 energy. You change all sacrifice X effects to regain X health until the end of turn, and then you draw 2 cards and gain 2 energy. So effectively this costs 0 energy, draws you 2 new cards to play, and then every time you would lose health to a sacrifice effect, you heal instead. The damage output is insane. Imagine playing both of these in a turn. I'm getting more cards, so I'm going to be adding more attack to this. I've got the energy so I can play this, and all my sacrifice effects are gaining me health. That's just absolutely ridiculous. You could be fighting the Act 2 boss with these in your deck, and I'd be feeling pretty good about that. Depends on the boss, but this card's also just generally very, very good as draw 2 cards, gain 2 energy. Effectively, a 0 energy draw 2 cards is really, really good. Yeah, not much more to say other than this card is really, really good value. And lastly, to look at the more status effect build, we have attack 4 and defense 4, so we're getting 8 points of stats for 2 energy, and then we get to put bleed 1 and vulnerability 1 on all enemies. Very, very good for multiplayer, as we'll have wider boards, and also it means that we set everybody up who needs bleed in play, so that comes into play a lot with the Seer. And we get to put vulnerability on everything, which then means the Seer can effectively go on a killing spree and clean up a lot of the enemies. Really, really good card. It is also sacrifice 1, so it will play into any of your other synergies, and it allows you to sort of straddle that line between playing status effects and also playing sacrifice. And you can just play this without worrying about being too far into either build. It's just all around very, very solid card. I really, really like this. This is fantastic. So that has been a deep dive into the Sorcerer class. I'm going to reveal one more card for this character, and you get this one if you beat the game on Nightmare mode and you want to increase the difficulty of the game by adding your own homebrew rules. You can use this class relic instead of the Swamp Plague. This one gives you a higher starting HP and also additional sanity, and this class relic just basically is a massive upgrade to Swamp Plague, which is just at the end of your turn you may inflict 1 condition on 1 enemy with no restrictions. So really, really good, and that means you can double up things like Prison, so that you get an extra 2 damage past the enemy's guard. Really, really good. And that's everything. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the Sorcerer class. We would absolutely love it if you have had a chance to play the game, if you could leave your comments down below to give some advice to some aspiring members of the Dark Arts. We'd love to hear more from you. What kind of content would you like to see for this game? Just go ahead and subscribe and you'll be the first to know whenever we have new videos out. But for now, we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Cheers.